Welcome, everybody who's coming into the Zoom room. Let us know where you are geographically. We've got a great show tonight.
What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Greetings, everybody. I am Love Coach Scott Thomas, and welcome to the Friday night edition of The Awakening World. And this entire weekend, we are celebrating some of our favorite authors and some of our favorite musical artists. And tonight we've got one of each. We actually have two musical artists because Omoshar, our house musician, is with us as well. But Matt Kahn, who is an author that has changed my life, and I know changed the lives or impacted the lives of so many of my friends, is with us tonight live. So we're going to get a chance to chat with Matt. And we also have a wonderful musical artist that we're introducing for the first time on The Awakening World, John Aston. And I should spotlight them as I talk about that. There's John, and of course, my wonderful co-host every Friday night, Trish Wright. And we're celebrating authors that we love. And before I go into a bigger introduction of John or Matt, I'm going to go to you, Trish, and ask you, who's an author that has impacted your life? And likewise, for all the people watching, and I should go ahead and extend a welcome to all of the people watching on Unify. I see we've got about 70 people on Unify right now. So let us know your favorite authors, where you are geographically, and then we are going to take questions for Matt and for John a little bit later on in the show. So, and I do see a lot of our regulars are here in the Zoom with us. Welcome. And anybody who's watching on over 100 Facebook groups and pages, thank you, John and Summer Raymer from the Sign Network, who arranged that for us to go out over so many different Facebook groups and pages. Come on into our Zoom room. It's easy. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com and register. And you can come in for free, get all of our links with a promo code of New Friend. globalpeacetribe.com, New Friend. And I'll be checking the chat box. Looking forward to hearing from all of you. And now I'm going to go back to Trish and ask her about kind of authors that have impacted her life. And then we're going to meet Matt Kahn.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, there's many of them. So the first one was a really funny book, and Matt, maybe you all have heard this, but it was How to Be an Adult by David Rico, and it was 100 pages of the hardest work I've ever done. It took me a year to read 100 pages because I was like, ah! It just like totally floored me. Like, how healthy angler. I had no idea that was such a thing. But I'm really currently deeply touched by authors like Octavia Butler and Audre Lorde and bell hooks. These people are literally melting my brain and and touching me in my soul in ways that, like, in places of my the bone marrow of my soul. Like, is that even might not even make sense, but I mean, honestly, it's been some really powerful work over the last little bit. Something that, so Scott and I just taught a class today called The Awakening World, and one of the pieces that was brought up is an Octavia Butler piece. And she, in one of her books, in the Parable of the Sower, she says that that to pray to God, or to pray, is to pray to change. And I love. So these are just some things that are up in my brain. Ooh, one more. Resmaa Menakem with the My Grandmother's Hands. Wow. There you go. All right, now I'm done. Thanks, Scott. I'm so excited, from Matt Kahn and from John Aston, and of course, I'm so happy to see you, Omashar and Debbie.
Beautiful. All right, well, with no further ado, we're going to add Matt to the scene here. His books, as I said before, have really impacted me. Uh, and we've had the absolute good fortune to have Matt on our show a few times, Saturday Night Live, and then recently The Awakening World. And Matt has a brand new book out, so we're going to go right into it. Matt, tell us about what's alive for you in your life right now and how that has showed up in your new book.
My goodness, what a question. And thanks again for having me. It's truly an honor to be here with
You're
everyone.
welcome.
What's up for me in my life is the last 3 years, I've gone through a profound integration where there's a stage of awakening where, of course, you experience the cessation of ego. And a lot of people don't know or experience that the ego then goes through its own transformation process, and it's almost like it gets reborn as an expression of light, and then we have to integrate that reborn ego back into the system. And so for the last 3 years, I've been going through a very profound experience of having that integration process in my awakening journey. And so for the last 3 years, the blending and integrating of the personal self and the spiritual self or transpersonal self has really brought me fully into my body. And for most of my life, I've had a very surreal, spiritual, energetic experience. And for one of the first times in my life, the greatest way that I describe that I feel is I feel real. And from that sense of feeling real and tangible, I wrote my new book, All for Love, The Transformative Power of Holding Space, because we're at a time in history where not only is it time to be heart-centered and help to correct the course of human history and rebirth this planet, but how are beings who are heart-centered going to navigate this world with an open heart in such an ever-divided climate?
Mhm.
And so I wrote this book on how we can communicate consciously, hold space for ourselves, and really interact with others from a loving space, despite the differences we may have or despite the divisions that the world is working out. So I'm really quite proud of what I wrote, and it's a book that shares the most of my personal journey, and it's a book that I spent most of my time bawling my eyes out writing, and it's also a book that touches me on the deepest level. And I'm so grateful to be here to share this book and to invite everyone to really take in all the wisdom and the magic that the universe channeled through me into this book.
Beautiful. So again, the book is called, I'm going to go to where we have it on Amazon,
Hey,
All for Love,
yeah.
The Transformative Power of Holding Space. There it is. It's
Yes.
on Amazon, and
Hey,
it's
look at that.
available for, yep, there it is. Matt,
Yeah.
of course, the book that I first read, my first book of yours, was Whatever Arises, Love That. Love all that arises. So could you talk a little bit about that concept? Because for any of our people who are new to you, that seems to be one of your signature foundational teachings.
Right.
How do we do that?
Well, it's interesting when I wrote Whatever Rises Love That, it's because, I came into this field as an intuitive healer, which was just spontaneously activated throughout my life in my early adulthood. And I didn't really know the spiritual path other than my own experiences throughout my life. And what happened was I would do sessions with people and I'd intuitively give them answers. And I would stand outside of myself and listen to what I said and listen to what they said. And that's how I learned about most paths, because I've only gone on paths based on my own experiences. And when I came into this field and I was in a awareness that, of course, love is the highest vibration, love is the answer. And I came into this reality of spiritual healing, or the spiritual genre. And it was perplexing to me because love is the highest virtue and value. And I found that a lot of spiritual paths or healing journeys weren't necessarily leaning on love as the procedure in which we facilitate healing. And I just saw an opportunity to say, what if every stage of spiritual growth, from healing ourselves of our traumas, our wounds, our cellular memories, throughout all stages of awakening, even the notion of manifestation, what if every stage of spiritual evolution was only taken in the most loving way? Because I started to see other paths, which I truly respect. And I thought, well, it doesn't strike me as the most loving way. And one of the things I say in my first book is, as a litmus test, if it's not the way that you would talk to a child in pain, it shouldn't be the way you talk to yourself. And I came into this industry with a lot of people spending time in meditation, berating themselves, watching their thoughts, living out of a rather superstitious reality. I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't say this word. And I found people in a state of hypervigilance and micromanagement. And I found that that was actually a barrier to the deepest healings and awakenings that life can provide us. And through what I've channeled and the way I teach and facilitate healing, both in my presence and the energy I channel when I speak, I found that love, in the way in which I've been guided to teach it, making peace with the inner child, helping the inner child not be resentful and take off the mask of the shadow, and all these interesting archetypal things, I have found that when we bring more of a balance of feminine and masculine to the spiritual journey, and not just go about it in a traditionally overly masculine way, I find that we're actually creating the kind of human being that's capable of balancing the masculine and feminine on the planet, because of course it's the imbalance of the masculine and feminine that's created the imbalance on all levels. And we can say, global warming, whatever it is. And so if we know that the feminine is coming back into prominence, then shouldn't that be where our spiritual journey begins? And so my contribution to this field is making sure that we're always approaching everything in the most loving, heart-centered way, because for me, that's the only way progress occurs.
So let's do an example.
Yeah.
When you're coaching somebody,
Yeah.
and let's say they've had a heartbreaking experience
Yeah.
with cancer, or a devastating disease.
Yeah.
How do you support them to see the love in it,
Right.
without it becoming a spiritual bypass?
Of course, it's a great question. Well, and the thing is, I wrote the book, Whatever Rises Love That. And so not everyone,
Right.
but it's a very common interpretation, let's say, to say whatever rises, love that, as if that is outside of you, because in our society, we think of that as the outside thing, because we tend to give our power to outside things as our validation. But what I was writing was whatever rises, love that, meaning love the one who's having the experience. And so if we are too busy trying to defeat cancer, we don't have the awareness to love the one having cancer. And so many people will sit with me and go, Matt, I don't love cancer. And I would say, well, if you sat in front of me and said, Matt, I have cancer and I love it, I would say, well, that's awesome, but that's besides the point. It's really it's not loving the condition you're in, because that's a bypass. That's just as much of a bypass as the old version of acceptance. Like, if I accept it, it will feel better, which is more of a mechanism. And so what I'm teaching people is let's love the one who's having cancer. Let's love the one who doesn't know if they're going to survive. Let's love the one who doesn't know what to do. Let's, instead of it being love versus fear, can we love the one who's afraid? Can we actually stop and love the one in the condition instead of saying that only free from the condition can I be free to love? And I think that's where we start to really find the gravity and power of love, that's not based in condition. And I think as human beings, it's where we really start to separate true love from what societally we call love, which is really arousal, right? When conditions are not awesome, we go, I'm not aroused. I don't like this. And for most people, when they're not aroused, they have no access to their consciousness. And so what I'm teaching people is how to access their consciousness without needing it to be through some form of arousal, so we can really actually define love as an act of service towards ourselves and others.
Oh, yes. I feel, oh, like I just feel really nourished by your words right now.
Thank you.
Um, you know, Matt, my definition of love has changed over the last couple of years, and
Has it?
shifted from whatever it was, which is this very programmed belief, to the radical acceptance of what is.
Yeah.
Can I love you there? And so in places, just I can love you there. I can love you there. I can love the melting amoeba of, yeah. I have a question for you, just to come back to this masculine and feminine, because my feed and all of the things that I'm watching on Facebook and Instagram and all is like blowing up with this masculine feminine thing. Now, I just want to say, like, I'm totally into the balance. This like this new world, this new being of people who are balanced in this.
Right.
My feed is like blowing up with the masculine and the feminine, and how the masculine is to dominate the woman, the female, and how the woman is supposed to be in submission. And I'm just curious, are you seeing all this as well?
Oh, I've seen it. And you know, that's the with all due respect to that path and that ideology, I look at that as how the spiritual ego tries to role play. Like, you play this role, I play this role, and we're all going to have our needs met. And for me, I find it to be not what I'm, not the direction I'm pointing to, because what I'm suggesting, you know, what I feel to be true and what I see to be true is that there's masculine and feminine energy in each person. And so what I look at is the balance of polarity of both in a human being, even though each human being tends to lean towards one but we all have both, right? And so I think that when we're in a spiritual path and it's like, you know, here's how a conscious woman is supposed to be with her man, and here's how a man's supposed to be, you know, those are the kind of teachings that seem to work really well in workshops. And then we get home and life happens, and, you know, we need to just put on our sweats, order a pizza, and get real. And, you know, for me, what I have helped a lot of people who have come from those kinds of paths. And all I can say is that if it resonates, you know, I applaud that. But I simply meet people when whatever path they're on runs out of steam. And then really, you know, for me, when I'm helping couples, whether I'm helping someone love themselves or I'm helping couples reconnect, what I find to be more helpful versus here's how a man's supposed to be or here's how a woman is supposed to be is, let's actually create an environment where we can each have time in our own lives to return to our own wholeness. Let us share our wholeness with each other, and let us in a relationship remind each other how much more we deserve to receive. And let's actually help each other up level our ability to give and receive love safely. And so for me, the container of intimacy, whether it's conversation, eye gazing, or whatever it is really about entering into a space of equality, of mutual surrender, and safety and sovereignty.
I'm verklempt. I'm going to cry. I mean, really though, it's well, and what's important here, I'm just going to be really, really just raw and honest with
Please.
you all, is that I have a balance of masculine and feminine. I
Yeah.
often run a little bit more masculine. Some of you have met my masculine, in my masculine form when I wear my mustache, and because it feels more connected to reality and
Yeah.
society that we live in now, to
Right.
actually play on this field
Right.
rather than create this hierarchy of
Totally.
gender or race or whatever. And this is what I'm loving about how heart-centered, yeah, the sovereignty piece, the heart-centered piece, the love piece, like how do we come back to love and not play this like, well, I'm going to play this role so I can get my feedback from Matt. Instead of just being like, you are a human being,
Yeah.
you woke up in this body with, and we're just going to meet on
That's
a
right.
true heart, soul level.
Yeah.
Like, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for articulating that so beautifully. And what I want to say is that I think that it's also, equal to what I love what you just said is how being in the masculine sometimes feels more rooted in reality. And someone had made a comment a couple minutes ago, and I just want to address it. There's an old spiritual myth that says keep the personal self and the spiritual self separate. There's this whole spiritual myth of like ego must be a bad thing. And one of the things I taught at a retreat a couple of weeks ago was, yeah, the ego can be inflated, and that's the examples we mostly see is an inflated ego of emotional inflammation. But there's also another imbalance of ego where a lot of empaths and sensitives who wind up getting abused by narcissistic patterning is because they don't have enough ego. And so I think the conversation of melding the personal and the spiritual together is part of the new paradigm spiritual embodiment. Just like I find that the ability for a woman such as yourself or any person to have the blend of the masculine and feminine is pivotal, because when we both meet as the blend of the masculine and feminine, we're meeting in wholeness, and then we can actually be real with ourselves and real with each other. And then instead of trying to impress each other, we can serve each other as we serve ourselves. And isn't that where we really have the greatest opportunity to meet and to see what really exists between us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we can get real that we are spirits in animating this body. Like,
that's right.
I need, this body needs an ego and a personality and identity.
That's right.
It doesn't run without it.
That's right.
Dying.
Right.
It needs all those
Right.
things to actually move through the world and to communicate with other humans,
Right.
and creatures, and move through the world.
Right.
I love what you're saying here so much.
Thank you.
Really, and just to share a little bit more is that I've been really looking at the constructs of gender,
Right.
of sexuality, of beauty standard. I've been like looking. I've been like peeling back the matrix.
Yeah.
And looking and being like, wow. And what happens, what I'm noticing, and maybe you can speak to this as well, is
Sure.
what I'm noticing is that the more authentic that I get,
Mhm.
the less that I participate, the more people are like kind of intimidated by just how real and present I am.
Yeah.
But also I notice how people are just, there's some fear there. And I'm curious, do you find that when you're communicating or when you're sharing your wisdom with your workshop attendees and your retreats, are they catching on really quickly and finding the integration between the dichotomy?
I think it's been an evolution of my teachings, and it's something I emphasize. And so I think my audience does, because I point to it so often and I teach it and I emphasize it so incredibly, because I've seen so many paths and how it creates these potholes and imbalances, and how we can, it's wonderful to point to a reality. At the same time, the question, and because, I've come through a life of various awakening experiences. I've lived in a state of samadhi for many years. At the same time, I'm also an intuitive healer. And so I have this interesting bridge between this awakening experiences and the mystical realities. And what I find to be interesting is that we can point to something and it can be overemphasized, and then we can glom onto that as if that's the thing. This is the end point, or this is where I'm supposed to arrive. And there's so many complex levels to this, including like when we talk about realization. from a quantum perspective, there's a realization of self-realization in the third dimension, fourth, fifth, all throughout. And so there's so many different realizations. And once you reach one, the next one is going to literally make the one you just had almost null and void. And so we have to actually be so open-minded and so open-ended with like, hey, this is true right now. And the only thing that never goes out of style is love. And so that's why the basis of all my teachings is love, because as I've gone through many awakenings, as I experienced liberation from ego, then integrating the reborn ego of, which is called the soul. The ego dies, it's reborn, now it's the soul back in the body. And that integration process, I find that things become simpler, things become clearer, but instead of it being an expanded reality, it's just a grounded, loving reality, because this is where spirit wants to be. Spirit is in this character, but I think it's time in history for us to kind of stop decompartmentalizing our multidimensional nature and actually just become fully functioning beings, because my interest is not only leaving this world more loving than when I arrived, but I want spiritual beings to be high functioning beings. And through the processes we go through, it's not always a high functioning experience. And so part of that is also my modeling of my experience to my audience of how can I constantly live a life of a high functioning, grounded being? Like, I'm the spiritual teacher and author. I also recently lost 25 pounds. I've returned to working out. I used to be a bodybuilder, and I'm back to weight training and bodybuilding, because my personal self is just as important and needing of being nurtured as my consciousness and spiritual self. And I just find that that is such an integrative perspective that's needed on this planet right now. And I'm just honored to be someone who constantly points in what I think of as a very healthy balance.
I love that. I don't know what's going on, but I'm finding that that piece right there. I wanted to say something back to what you shared about the book.
Yeah.
And what you shared about your personal experience.
Yeah.
So, what I'm noticing with working with a lot of my clients.
What's that?
Is this place of that men really have a hard time sharing their feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that you're modeling. You shared you're like I cried through the book, and I wrote all, like, your personal experience. I think that is incredibly crucial.
Thank you.
And critical for this time in our lives, like for the man, the masculine, to share the true, the unzip their shell and to be seen. And I think that modeling is so important. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's very true. And I think that, the old school masculine wants to be the protector and the guard. And, I think that it's such a funny way where it subtly sends a message that a woman is helpless or not able to be sovereign in her own strength. And I think that,
Where did they learn that?
I don't know, who made that up? Like, where did that come from?
I mean, I can tell you.
They didn't read whoever made it up didn't read the David Rico book. I can tell you that much. But which is a great book, by the way. As is one of the only books I've ever read when I was in college. I spent 2 months in college before I quit. And the only book I ever read was The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. So as my contribution to the authors we love, I want to give some love to M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, before I quit college. But we find it in the new paradigm masculine power that the masculine doesn't demonstrate his power by like guarding the feminine. The masculine demonstrates his power by respecting the feminine as an equal, and actually demonstrates his power by surrendering into the feminine. And so as men, when we are truly strong, we are strong enough to be in tune with our feelings, to share how we feel without projecting, to take in information and to listen without assuming we're being attacked or we need to fix something. And if we're going to be such powerful men, then surrender to the feminine and die into the space of intimacy where we meet as one. And that's legit. That's legit.
That's exactly what I teach in my coaching and in my work, is attunement.
I love it.
literally teach embodied feelings, attunement,
Yeah.
and audacious loving action towards connection.
Audacious loving action. I love that.
I know.
That's awesome. How great are all this is I've never done one of these Friday things. This is great, guys. This is fun. This is wonderful.
Scott and I know why he brings me in because I'm kind of random. Like my brain, I call it big hummingbird energy. Other people call it ADHD. I call it big hummingbird energy, and it just works in this like. I also want to bring John Aston into this conversation a little bit, and so we've been sharing a lot on the masculine and the feminine. We've been sharing about men's feelings. We've been really sharing about maybe the authors that have touched you. What would you like to share about any of this? Can someone help me put him on screen?
Oh, John's.
John, you're muted.
There we are. Hello. Yeah, in some ways it's actually those are concepts I don't actually think that much about, although I actually have this very strong sense of those archetypal energies, if you will, each of them being very alive in me. But I don't direct a lot of attention to necessarily exploring them or analyzing them, but just letting them express themselves as they seem naturally inclined to do in the course of my life. Yeah.
Has there been anything shared between Matt or I that really touched you? Like something that you're like, ooh, I want to know more about, or something that landed in your heart, your soul, in that bone marrow of your soul, that place.
Yeah. Well, the radical acceptance, the radical embrace of what's here it's the essence of what I share. It's the essence of the deepest understanding of life, is to see the absolute divinity of everything that's here, absolute divinity of everything. So that to me is what spirit is. That's to me what the nature of reality is that which includes everything and is everything. And as I listened to you, I heard a lot of that stream, a lot of that thread of that. And that's really what love is to me, is the absolute embrace of what is. Yeah.
And if I may jump in and just offer this, because it's just intuitively wanting to compliment what John's saying and just right on this thread, because I can feel John, and I can feel the consciousness flowing through him, which is beautiful. What's interesting is for me, I've come back into my body, an integragen, but, and I experience myself as the divine masculine, but in my true identity, or how do I experience myself? I actually don't experience myself as a masculine or a feminine. I experience myself as, I would say, pure consciousness, but even that is just
too many words.
Even that's just being nice.
Yeah.
I don't experience myself, or I could say my experience of myself is seen to be an experience, and what's seeing the experience is not an experience. I can say that. And so then as I integrate, I am able to be a masculine with my feminine wherever she may be in the world that I haven't met, right? And I'm not afraid to die into the intimacy with her, because my experience is I've died so many times on my spiritual path. I've died so many times that I've literally forgotten or lost the attachment to who's actually dying. And so what's interesting is, for me, I find this to be an integration of such a non-dual radical awakening that has happened to me, where I can actually play the role of a masculine in this beautiful Halloween costume of reality, but in my true essence, even though I emphasize love, my experience of myself is freedom, without just to give words.
Yeah, and as you were saying too,
yeah,
to realize that radical transcendental freedom is not anything other than what we might also think of as our ordinary everyday human life.
Sure.
There's no dichotomy there, which is what's so wondrous.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, John. I described it, a stage of my life. I taught this once. I described it as I took. There's a period of my life where I had to scrub the stench of spirituality off of me. That's how I described it.
Yeah,
Right? I had to
for sure.
scrub. Like if people look at my eyes, you could see. Okay, you could see if you could feel energy. Okay, but like they're like even as an author, I get recognized on the street quite regularly, and it's a huge honor. If I'm on a plane, people recognize me. Sometimes I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm just the funny, polite guy who will ask you about your interest. And so for me, it's to parallel that, it's the same way of like, sometimes I'm someone and sometimes I'm no one. And for me, my experience is actually the same. And so I love what you just said. It's so funny.
It is very funny. Yeah, to realize that our just what we think of as just my everyday, kind of same old, I'm doing my life, I'm living my life.
Yeah.
And then we hear in spiritual, teachings of, wow, there's this extraordinary, amazing reality, and I have to do X, Y, or Z to somehow, that it's something other than what you're currently experiencing.
Right.
And that's the fantasy.
Sure.
But actually, what you're experiencing right now is this extraordinary reality.
Right.
This is it.
This is it.
Truly.
Piece about the piece about this spiritual community, I understand that the scrubbing it off is that there is something that is not sacred.
Right.
And I'm always like, no, like it doesn't land in my brain, because I'm like, how could this not be sacred? How could like this pillow not be sacred? Just
Right.
it doesn't have the specific presence and reverence that I'm bringing to it
Yeah.
in the moment, and that makes it more sacred. No, it is not. We are sacred beings.
Yeah.
Our laughter, our joy, our orgasms, our morning poos, that is sacred.
Yeah.
We're beautiful beings in this incarnate in this body.
Sure.
This is sacred. This connection, the juiciness, the tether of connection that we're sharing. That's
I love that. I love that emphasis on devotion, because there's two. How I look at it is there's two sides of the spiritual journey. So we make the prayer hands, but there's inquiry, or contemplation, or wisdom, and there's devotion. And when a lot of spiritual paths has contemplation, self-inquiry, stuff like this, but without the devotion, it becomes too overly masculine and too stringent, too hard. And then, of course, if we have too much devotion, not enough wisdom, then we are impulsive, ungrounded, and irresponsible and such. And so I think, what I feel like, and I love that we're having this conversation, because I think we all have so much to contribute to it, especially John talking about ordinary awakening as a person with an extraordinary musical talent, which is, again, the wisdom coupled with the devotion. So I think it's a perfect example. And if we look at the world, and the world's going through a transition, the one thing we always need, and spirituality doesn't preclude this, in fact, spirituality needs this more than ever, is we need balance on this path. And I think the constant journey and the work that you're doing, Trish, and John, what your contributions is, we're all creating a sense of helping people even out and balance, because that's really the journey, is just a journey of ever refining balance. And there's just, trips, and there's overemphasis, and there's this is it, no, this is it, no, this is it, and all this kind of stuff. And, at the end of the day, what I find to be interesting is that there is this real calling to awaken that happens in every heart. But at the same time, sometimes it's easy to want to ditch your personal self when you don't like the character that you're embodying, and you don't like the self that you are. And so what I also like to contribute to this is that through love, I feel like love is helping to preserve the Dharma and the wisdom and couple it with devotion, so that it's not liberation that's really masquerading as self-hatred.
yes.
Speaking
of devotion,
Yes.
speaking of John's devotion and love, I'm wondering if you would share your devotion and love with us now.
Be happy to.
Yay.
Be a little music.
You knew. You heard it.
So a lot of what I'm sharing about in my own writings and teachings and music also is really discovering, as you were saying, that the absolute divinity of everything, the absolute, yeah, that's probably as good a word as any. And this song came out of a really funny experience I had. I was on the way actually to see a teacher of mine at the time, and I suddenly had this image come to me of a mouse being caught in a mouse trap, not a mouse trap, but a maze, like the rat in the maze, and what gets the rat confused and they can't escape the maze is that everywhere they turn, they kind of see the same thing, right? So it gets confusing. And I had this feeling like I was a rat caught in the maze, and the maze that I was caught in was the maze of reality, the maze of God. And that everywhere I turned, I would always see the same thing, and I would always see the same reality, this absolute reality, this absolute divinity. So what I found was that I was actually stuck. I had no escape. I couldn't get away from reality. So it flipped everything upside down. It was like, rather than having to find reality, I realized I could never escape this divinity, because it was everything. So that every single wave that arose was this exquisite, extraordinary ocean of existence. So this is called No Escape. There is no escape from here. We are hopelessly trapped inside this maze of truth. There is no dry land anywhere, 'cause everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean, and everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean. There is no escape from here. We are hopelessly, oh yeah, trapped inside this maze of love. There is no dry land anywhere, 'cause everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean, and everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean. What grace to know and revel in the ecstasy of this sweet bondage that is our liberation. 'Cause everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean, and everything is wet, everything is wet, everything is wet in the ocean, and everything is wet in the ocean, and everything is wet in the ocean, everything is wet in the ocean.
this conversation is, and this music and like positioned between these two and three, Scott, beautiful men, and it feels so. It feels like balm to my heart, to my it's heart. It was really nourishing, like a soul superfood, if I might. Just in this moment, like it's so up for me. So thank you both for just being here and real and present and sharing so much of your gosh the core of your strength of love. That is thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. It really is. And it's an honor to have this kind of conversation and this dialogue and this sharing, with all of us, the backdrop of John's music, Trish, you bringing your beautifully integrated, amazing spirit and just the beautiful share where we're all just kind of bringing different perspectives and aspects. And it's really like we're all attending this beautiful, delicious meal together, and we're all just bringing different dishes for this potluck, and we all get to sample each other's frequencies and consciousness, and and it's a beautiful thing. And it's a snapshot of what we can expect to experience our world to be like as we continue to do the work individually and collectively. And so I think we are demonstrating some really great hope and positive news for those watching and for the world, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah. Oh, so this is exactly why we're called the Awakening World.
I love that.
That we're all doing our part. Matt, you have your special medicine that you bring to the world. John, you have your special medicine. I have a very specific medicine to give. Scott has his. Omashar has his. Debbie has his. And this is when we commit. You called it devotion. When we commit and devote our lives to love, to actually choose love. This is what happens. This sort of. I mean, we don't even know really each other, but we're having such a tangible connection from around the world, the planet, that if I met you, Matt, today or tomorrow or like 6 years from now, you'd be like, oh my God, right? And if I met you, John, it'd be the same. And so this is where we get to choose a new reality every moment by choosing love.
Yes.
I'd love to hear just a little bit more about, like, Matt, a little bit more from your perspective of, if you can give us like a tidbit, like our viewers, our listeners, just one tidbit of something. Like, I love action steps, like an action plan. Like, if you can give them like one thing that they could do today that would just shift their whole reality or their world, or something to invite them into.
I love that. I think one of the greatest actions, and thank you for that invitation, I think one of the greatest action steps that we can take on the spiritual path and in our lives is, I think it's very therapeutic to learn to be honest with ourselves about ourselves and not trying to frame things in a right way or afraid to do it wrong. Like, people will stand in front of me in an event and they'll say, I think, no, I'm supposed to say I feel. And it makes me want to devour the earth in one gulp. It makes the Shiva in me just want to completely devour this world and start over, to be honest. And I say it with love, but I think what a lot of spiritual beings need, and I think what's very helpful, is that spirituality is about finding a safe, sacred space to be honest with yourself, because that's where intimacy begins. So I think that when we stop therapizing ourselves and we stop diagnosing ourselves, we stop labeling ourselves, and we start really like, how do I really feel? Because only when we admit how we feel do we know the next one in line to be love. So in my teachings, I will say, well, perhaps anger is next to be loved, but we can't love the anger until we first let anger have its say. And instead of having it say on people, we have it say within the context of our own sacred space. And so I really think that the spiritual journey is about creating a safe space for all of our inner experiences and expressions to be heard without corrected, without reframed, without being bypassed, and to really meet the grit and the gravity of our personal experience, knowing that which is meeting that personal experience is always prior to, within, and beyond the person. And so I think as a good action step, even though I'm that I love you guy, love what arises, I think that the most meaningful action step that we can take is to know that it's safe to be honest, that if we say words that people will label as negative within ourselves, we're not going to manifest more of the same, and all this stuff that we can literally just wake up out of and just, if I can say this words, be fucking honest.
Yes.
The truth shall set us free. And I think there's a difference when you're honest with yourself versus projecting what we think is honesty onto other people. That's the difference. And so as a first step of really building a relationship with yourself, it's okay to admit how you feel. It's okay to be in a way that seems to break certain spiritual rules. And I think it's really, really key that we get to know ourselves on such a deep level, because how can we serve our own needs if we don't know ourselves that well?
Yes. It's very gestalt of you. And how Scott would say it is that we're here to love. We're here to love ourselves first.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely. I love it there.
Can I ask you a question? Just because we're having this, I've never had dialogue. Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Oh,
I would, because this is such a fascinating experience for me, and I'm totally loving this. What do, in your integration, which I think is so amazing, and I love the demonstration of how you're integrating it. Hey, and look, hey, it's Scott too. Hey, what do you find is the current edge you are currently traversing?
Wow, good question. So, I'll share a little bit of how I got here.
Okay.
I've been doing deep decolonization work. I've been doing I can't use the term decolonization because I'm not a colonized human, though I'm deconstructing whiteness and these layers of social construct on such a, my reality is a little melty over here.
Yeah, it's all right.
To filter through the matrix
Right.
of oppression or the matrices of harm is, Scott can probably attune to be like, wow, there's lots of movement here. So what I'm literally pushing my edge right now is the place where my true authentic raw expression is often off-putting because it's so present and real that it can, again, so it's like it can be off-putting, intimidating, and then there's how do I want to be authentic, and there's a social program that's still running. So we'll call beauty standard for one. I know that if I want to just dress like a man all the time, that the way that I'm met in the world is actually significantly harder than the privileges that I have. So that is an edge that I'm finding where to be authentic. Well, not where to be authentic, but how to play in the realm, how to not be so and actually again with the rest of the world.
Right.
So that's the edge that I play with. That's the edge that's sometimes really challenging for me, because don't we all want belonging and acceptance and love? And there I'm like, yeah, this is some wildness of this being called Trish. And when I find judgment, I'm like, oh, can I love them in their need for safety or their value?
Right.
And I just love them there in that, in their perspective.
Sure.
There you go.
I love that. And that's great. It's interesting because I had never heard the term decolonization. And so it's lovely to learn about things and different ways of approaching nuances in this journey. And I think that's I love the, the edge of how authenticity ebbs and flows. One of the ways that I personally experienced what I feel like you're referring to is when I went through a series of awakenings in my life. I did a teaching called "There's Only One Face." And in our world, we're constantly taught that we have different faces. We have this face in our family, this polite face. And for me, what I found is when I woke up, several masks fell off, and what remained was one face, and it was a faceless face. And so for me, I have found that in this bottoming out process, for me, authenticity is just being one face.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was when this is just my personal testimony, when I refused to shapeshift, which is what I've spent my whole life doing. I spent my entire life shapeshifting, trying to balance out everyone else's imbalances, and then I'm being all things to all people, and then I feel resentful or unfulfilled. And this is historically my past. When I refuse to be anything but the faceless face of what I call my truth, just truth. Right? There's no my truth, just truth, which is just inclusivity, which is what John just sang about, right? The ocean, always wet. In fact, next time I see John in person, I'll be like, John, ocean's always wet. Because I love that line. That was great, by the way. I love that. When I refused to shapeshift to I'm going to be this person to increase this likelihood, when I stopped that completely, I found that the world around me changed.
Yes.
And it feels like that's the path you're also on as well.
It is the path that I'm on.
Yeah.
And when so there's a balance here.
Yeah.
Probably speak to this as well. Is that there's a balance between, like, I could just run towards that side of wild authenticity, and that's where I want to go.
Sure.
I still need friends in co-regulation.
Right.
I still need those people. I still need connection, and because I mean, who knows? Like my family kind of has dropped away. Lots of my friends have dropped away, which is good, because if they don't love me for the wild, vast human that I am, then that's okay. I can love them. But there's like trying not to trip reality, like totally trip reality for everyone else.
Sure.
It's finding the balance between codependency and attunement, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love this conversation so much. And
it's good. And I will say that what I found is the balance between codependency and attunement for me in my journey, my experience, was I found, it's just dropping it right now. I'll make up a new phrase for myself, even though I don't think I've invented it. But my new phrase is quiet authenticity.
Yes.
Quiet authenticity. So for me, my authenticity and my confidence comes from an extraordinarily quiet place. And so I enter into a moment, people either know me or they don't, which is whatever, it's going to be. And I enter in a very quiet space, an incredibly quiet space. And from the quiet space, I am equally authentic to my experience, nor am I pulling or poking at anyone else's construct of reality, right? And I'm just entering in as a complement, even though that doesn't mean that someone else's reality I have to take on as a way of creating some form of agreement to keep the peace. And so for me, the phrase quiet authenticity, which is something that just kind of spontaneously arose within myself over many years, it allows me to bask in the glory of this beautiful diversity of the world, to see the differences that exist in human beings. And if I meet someone on the plane and they go, well, I'll tell you a funny little story. This is actually true. I was on a plane, and half my stories are on a plane because I spend a lot of times on planes. And I was on a plane and I was talking to someone, And they said, what do you do for a living? I said, oh, I'm a spiritual teacher. And they said, oh, spirituality, I think that's a bunch of BS. And I looked at them and I laughed and I said, I know, right? Right? And they said, what kind of teacher are you? And I said, a funny one. Because that doesn't, like, I'm just here to be a part of the conversation, but like, is that supposed to change my reality? Like, that's just someone telling me their experience that probably historically comes from religion or something else. And I'm there to hold space for the healing that's occurring in them. But it's very interesting when we all can have independent realities. And what I talk about in my new book, All for Love, is the radical approach of we don't have to find common ground in order to connect. What we just need is to be interested in other people's passions without getting tripped up in their passion is different than my passion. And if they're for something I'm against, and all this stuff that we do, because, on the collective level right now, if we look at the collective ascension, what is humanity working out huge right now? Righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Righteousness of like, this is what's right, that's what's wrong, what side are you on, and all this division. And as I talk a lot about this formula I created of absorption foreshadows transcendence. So we have to be absorbed in righteousness as a foreshadowing of transcending it. And so the world is just, we're moving our way through this righteousness. It's very deep, it's very heavy. Spiritual righteousness can be very heavy. And I find that when we find quiet authenticity, we can honor someone's passion. Someone can be passionate about something we may not be passionate about. They may like something we dislike, but what would it be like if we can actually just celebrate what someone else finds meaning in, even if we don't ourselves find meaning in that? And I find that to be a very beautiful way of communicating. So.
Oh, thank you for that. That was actually a very, very helpful.
Thank you.
I heard what you were saying to me.
My pleasure. Well, just dropping in, whatever. I don't know.
No, I heard it. Like, it was a good nugget that just like in my DNA.
It's awesome. Well, you guys, God, what a great gathering of souls. And even also, the participants on this call who are watching this, whether live or on replay, the consciousness and the energy of those who are gathering with us are also contributing to all that we are creating together. So we are literally all together creating this energy field of harmony, and all of us have the right to feel and to take in the beautiful success of what this moment is creating, and what human consciousness is capable of expressing, and something that I think is really beautiful to share. In my background, throughout my life, I've had a lot of mystical experiences, a lot of memories of, look, I don't know where I'm from, but I know I'm not from here, that kind of thing, like if I saw a ship land, I'd be like, is that my uncle? Is that Steve? Pete? Am I late to the barbecue? But what I think is interesting is that we all know that there are beings from other civilizations. A lot of us come from different solar systems and planets. And a lot of these places have such high levels of technology. But what's the one thing the Earth plane has that those other beings don't, which is so fascinating? We have a sense of individual self, and we have emotions and a nervous system.
Yes.
This makes this planet such an advanced exploration for these higher dimensional beings that have technology that we can't even conceive of. And their fascination is, what's it like to feel and to process, and then to grow and cognize and become better and expanded as a result, and to do it in a vacuum of time. Like, we are the artist community of the solar system. This is the most badass place to live, honestly. And I'm just glad we're all here together.
I call it like a theme park. It's like Disneyland. It's like spiritual Disneyland. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna go. We're gonna come down to this planet and go for the ride. And sometimes it's like gross, and sometimes it smells bad, and sometimes it's like woo. But you're standing in line a lot as a human. I don't know about you, but I stand in line a lot. Stand in line.
Sometimes it's a booze cruise, Sometimes it's a booze cruise, and
exactly.
Sometimes we eat too much of the buffet, and
Exactly.
And ultimately, we're here to learn to love.
Ultimately.
That's every single person. That's true.
Well said. Oh, that's so. You guys are so cute.
Oh, you did?
I did right before you got in here.
And I love, thank you. I mean, for me, it's been like, internet, blah, blah, blah. And I love how you two just have taken over and had this incredible, dynamic, wonderful conversation. And I look forward to going back and watching.
Yeah.
Well, honest to God, we're just channeling John.
Yeah.
This is John's just sitting there and just channeling this vibe, and we're just but honestly, and I say this with love, it's been such a beautiful connection. What a cute dog. It's such a beautiful connection for me to just kind of, we're all people in this field and we're all doing incredible work. And I think what's amazing in the new paradigm, and something that I'm really a part of promoting, and I think is awesome, is that even though I play a certain role, I meet people as equals, and it's very important to me to do this. And so tonight, participants, whatever role we play, we are all meeting as equals and equally co-creating the space together. And I think that when we start to see and meet as equals, we start to really feel the ripeness and tangibility of what we are consciously creating, which is literally love in tangible form. And, I bow to John, I bow to Trish, and to all of us, all of us on this call. It's a beautiful thing when we can demonstrate our level of consciousness by our ability to connect and cooperate. And what a beautiful model for the world.
And everybody watching, everybody who hears your voice right now, whether you're watching the recording or a replay, I like to think we're all imaginal cells in the new butterfly forming out of the old dying paradigm. The old paradigm was not sustainable.
Right.
We have form. And every cell is equally important. Every cell is equally important. They have different functions, but they're all. I love. I do want to give John, I know that John did a song and spoke, but I do want to give John a minute here. And by way of introduction, I've never met John before, but one of my best friends is Jonathan Robinson. Jonathan will be on the show tomorrow. He's written 14 books. Jonathan's got my favorite artist is John Austin. This guy is amazing. He played John's music for me, and I said, well, we've got to get him on the show. So, John, that's how I met you, was through Jonathan.
Sweet.
What's you in the dialogue and the conversation so far?
Sorry, you broke up there a little bit, Scott. I couldn't hear what you said. Does that your question?
Yeah, what stands out for you in tonight's conversation so far?
It's like Matt was talking about, how, people coming from all these different realms and planets, and it's amazing to hear you speak of diversity, the diversity of what is calling people, what is pulling on people, where their own edge is, where their own, it's quite unique, obviously, for each one of us. And my own explorations and my work is, it's almost coming at all of this in I would say, a less conceptual, less sort of psychological, even though I'm a psychologist, ironically. It seems like over the many years, my explorations have led to more and more simplicity. I say that the simplest practice, if you will, is to simply feel what's here. And when I say that, I'm not talking about emotions, because emotions are actually conceptualizations of what's here. That what we're actually feeling is absolutely so radically beyond what we imagine it to be. And what the interpreting mind is telling us is actually going on here is actually not what's going on here, not even close. And that the more I just feel the presence of what's here, which is why I invite people into that simple exploration, the more reality reveals its wonder beyond wonder, its beauty beyond beauty. I opened my last book with the famous Shakespeare quote. You know, there are greater things than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. You know, that this is much, 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 much more. It's much richer. It's much more extraordinary. It's much more alive. It's much more luminous than we often imagine it is. And even the simplest, most, as I was saying earlier, most seemingly ordinary, mundane of experiences are just shockingly alive and awake and luminous. And it's funny because people will hear something like that and imagine, oh, well, but I must be seeing something different because I'm not seeing that luminosity somehow. But actually, that's exactly what you're looking at, is the luminosity. Like, how much more luminous do you want it to be? It's absolutely so lit up. And it's a funny thing, you know, over these many years too, of the different practices I've engaged in and even taught. It's sort of like, in a certain way, spiritual practice, I say, is a bit like going out on a bright sunny day. The sun is shining brilliantly, and we light a match to try to make the light brighter. And that's how bright this reality is, how absolutely awake this world is. And yeah, it's quite something. I always say, go, whatever it is you're seeking, whatever it is you're looking for, the openness, the love you were speaking of earlier, the sense of inseparability of everything, go to the master, go to life itself, because life itself will show you that is exactly the way it is. It is absolutely wide open without any borders or boundaries. It is absolutely inclusive of everything. So it's not anything we need to do. It's already what's happening. It's already what's shining. It's already what's exploding forth as every instant of life. So that's pretty good news. The great good news, indeed. So, yeah.
Also on Facebook.
Oh,
It's
welcome.
amazing how eclectic you are. You do music, you write books, you do academic writings. Is there anything particular on your website you'd really like to direct our audience to?
There's a I think, Bobby, well, there's all sorts of things. You can find my music there, and then there's a link there on audio and video that has many, many interviews I've done, podcast interviews, meditations and inquiries, and all sorts of fun things. I just did a really, really fun interview the other day with Sam Harris, which just went live on his Waking Up app, if anyone knows about Waking Up. And that was a really, really fun conversation he and I had. And so, yeah, you can find all that stuff on my website. So, yeah.
And I'm being told that our sound isn't very good, so I apologize for that. And I also want to, again, just remind people, if you can now pre-order Matt's book. And I am so grateful that Matt has decided to spend time with us tonight and to write this book all for life.
That's right.
Again, go to Amazon, you can pre-order, and definitely make sure you follow Matt. You know what he's doing. Both so much. I'd love to give each of you a chance for like a closing comment, and then maybe John, if you'd bless us with a closing song, that'd be wonderful.
Happy to do that.
Besides having the Mr. Rogers moment of learning a new word, decolonization.
That's right.
From Mrs. Rogers here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and by the way, decolonization, I didn't know the word before Trish brought it into my world. But now, the festival that we're at right now, it's becoming a big movement.
Wow. I'll look into it. That's interesting.
We're centering this idea of whiteness. Like there's if you walk back, like class, we're constructed, right? So yeah, I shared this a little bit before, but you, as a person who's white passing or a white-bodied person, considered this way, racialized as white, We can't decolonize our work, but we can decenter whiteness, or we can deconstruct this concept of white as a race. Oh, there you go. Just my 2 cents. But yeah, it was really amazing because we're looking to bring everybody into attunement. We're bringing everyone into this balanced place where everyone is. Now, you probably really love it here. Soul Play. We are playing with our souls. Soul to soul.
How's the food? That's what I want to know. How's the food?
Amazing.
No barbecue. No barbecue.
Oh, that's all right, but that's good because that's what gets me places. You want me to go there? Tell me about the food.
They had mango sticky rice last night.
Done. I'm there.
Uh-oh.
That's how easy it is.
We just have to feed you?
Yes.
Now I know.
Now you know. It's a secret of all secrets. My finger doesn't point at the moon. It points to lunch and dinner. And I'm just kidding. But I'm a big foodie, and actually cooking is a big art form for me, aside from writing and teaching. And so, and I just want to, again, be excited to hear John's closing song, and just want to say thank you to everyone. It's been such an incredible experience. Thank
Matt, always such a joy.
Thank you, sir.
For being in our world and sharing wisdom and doing it with so much humor, so much fun, so much.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Pleasure to meet you.
Well, we're going to turn it over to you, John. Spotlight.
In the spirit of Matt's theme of love, I thought I'd share the song called Fall in Love with Now. Everything is rising, and everything is passing away. Everything is changing, and nothing remains. And everything is here for just a moment. So why do we insist that it remain? And suffer needlessly instead of being. Now, just fall in love with now. Just fall in love with now. Ooh, just fall in love with now. Every moment and falling in love. Every moment we are falling, falling, and falling, and falling into love. There is only falling.
Oh.
Well, consensual hugs and cheek kisses to you all if you want them.
Love how dropped in you were as you sing that song. You were imbibing it so incredibly. It's just beautiful to watch, honestly, especially a man drop into the vibration of love so beautifully as you sing it. My God, thank you. What a modeling. A beautiful modeling.
These are beautifully modeling, feeling.
And women, we've got Debbie Johnston, and
Oh, yeah.
Debbie's there too. Oh.
Thank you.
Well, a reminder that this is the first night of our weekend. Every weekend we pick a topic, and this weekend it's authors that we love. I want to acknowledge a lot of people that put in the chat box, both in the Facebook pages and in our Zoom room, some of their favorite authors. And I saw Richard Bach and Jonathan Livingston Seagull in there, and Seth Speaks.
Oh, I didn't see that.
That were really important to me, and somebody else mentioned them. And we've got wonderful authors tomorrow night, Saturday night. We've got Catherine Woodward Thomas. We've got my buddy Jonathan.
Oh,
We've got Courtney Maum. And we've got a few other wonderful authors joining us tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we're going to go deep. One of my favorite authors, one of my favorite human beings, Andrew Harvey. I love Andrew. And Josie Ann, wonderful doctor, sexologist, is going to be with us with her book. She's great. So, and we have music as always. Tomorrow, Christian Hoffman is my co-host tomorrow night, and she's going to play. And then we've got Nina Gray, who's recorded a special song just for us, honoring it's Gay Pride Month. And it's a beautiful song she wrote just for the Awakening World. That's going to make its premiere tomorrow night.
Right, tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night. So do join us tomorrow, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you again. I'm going to go to gallery view so we can see everybody. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, John. Thank you, Debbie.
thank you, Matt. Thank you, John. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Trish.
Trish, who jumped in beautifully, amazingly.
And I'm just gonna say, if you want some tools on self-love, every Thursday at 10 a.m. we have people from all over the world. We have coaches and therapists from all over the world giving you free tools to just love and love yourself and each other better. So show up. The Self-Love Show.
10 a.m. Pacific time every Thursday morning. It's a wonderful show. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful evening. If you are watching the replay of the recording, we love you as well. All of our recordings are on YouTube at Global Peace Tribe. Just go to the Global Peace Tribe channel. We've got amazing stuff there. And thank you again, Matt and John and Omashar. We love Omashar, and Omashar will be blessing us with music tomorrow night. During the main show, we're going to have Omashar playing music tomorrow night.
It's a beautiful picture watching you two both there, and I watched everything fall away from you, Scott. The love quotient went up 100% when you were sitting next to Trish. It's just like, whoa, this is beautiful. Namaste.
It's a blessing to sit next to Trish as opposed to fiddling with my hotel room trying to get my computer to work.
We're very good friends.
Yeah, I love this woman very much. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everyone.